You are about to see the history of the Church of the Brethren as depicted in 12 large mural paintings. These murals are at Camp Mack in Indiana and are the work of Medford Neher, Brethren, minister, and artist. The first mural depicts the Church of the Brethren in Germany from its organization by Alexander Mack and 7 associates in 1708 to the migrations to America in 1719 and 1729. Let us look at the 3 component parts of this mural. Here, around the New Testament, which they are accepting as their rule of faith and practice, you see the little group of 8 religious refugees, 5 men and 3 women, who, discontented with the cold formalism and spiritual deadness of the state churches and unwilling to be mere pietistic separatists, counted the cost and dared to launch at Schwarzenau, Germany in 1708 a new religious movement. Standing in the center with his hands upon the book is the 29-year-old leader, Alexander Mack. In the background you can see the state churches, Catholic, Lutheran, and Reformed, from which our founding fathers turned away, and a rising cloud of persecution. The costumes are accurate for the period. This is the baptismal scene in the Eder River. One of the men, whose name was never revealed, has baptized Mack. Now Mack is baptizing the others. The pastor's good wife is keeping the morale of the flock intact. Note the cross-like composition used by the artist in this group and the fanatical expression on the face of one of the ecclesiastical authorities to be seen in the immediate background. That cloud of persecution will soon break in a merciless storm. Persecution has raged in fury. Anna Margaretha Mack and 2 daughters have died. Here Mack, his 3 sons, and most of the remaining members in Europe, 126 in all, are waiting to board the good ship Allen at Rotterdam, Holland in July 1729 to go to America, the new world of religious freedom. Peter Becker and a group of 20 families had begun this migration to Pennsylvania in 1719. The migration of these 2 large groups shifted the scene of activity and interest from Europe to America. The second panel of the mural depicts the organization of the Church of the Brethren in America. See the landing of Peter Becker and his party in 1719, and the organization meeting, baptism, and love feast, which were held on Christmas Day, 1723. Now for the details. Peter Becker and his wife, followed by many members of the Crefeld congregation, 20 families in all, land on the shores of Pennsylvania. Prominent in the few possessions which they carry with them into the New World is the Bible. For a few years they were busy, in Germantown and the wilderness beyond, hewing out homes, getting established in the New World, and adjusting certain misunderstandings and differences among themselves. In the fall of 1722, Peter Becker and certain of the Germantown brethren visited the scattered brethren on the frontier. In August 1723, an erroneous rumor that a famous evangelist of the church had arrived from Europe brought a number of the brethren to Germantown. They were entertained in the home of Peter Becker. Other visits were exchanged. 6 aroused people asked for baptism. The time for united, aggressive action had come. On Christmas Day, 1723, a council meeting was held in the Becker home, and the Germantown congregation was organized. Peter Becker, although not an ordained elder, was asked to be the leader. Here he is instructing the candidates for baptism in a faith and practice which are rooted in the New Testament. By the tree stands Martin Erner. He, his wife, and 4 neighbors have come from Conestoga, 35 miles up the Schuylkill River, for baptism. In the late afternoon, the group walked 1 1/2 miles to a pool in the Wissahickon Creek, and there baptism was administered to the 6 applicants. This was the first instance of baptism by triimmersion in North America. That evening, in the home of John Gomery, a love feast was held. 23 people, including the 6 members just baptized, participated. Peter Becker is leading the group in song. Thus, on Christmas Day, 1723, our first congregation in America, Germantown, was organized, our first baptismal service performed, and our first love feast held. See in the shadowy background their vision of taking their witness to members and friends scattered in the back country, a dream realized the following year. The third panel tells the story of the missionary visitation and organization work which characterized the growth and strengthening of the church from the Germantown beginnings to 1728, the year before Alexander Mack and his company came to America. Note the forward surge of 14 brethren, 7 on foot and 7 on horseback, as, headed by Peter Becker bearing the word, they swing in determined march out of Germantown into the wilderness on October 23, 1724. Stops were made at Indian Creek, Faulkner's Swamp, and Coventry, where a church, our second in America, was organized and Martin Erner placed in the ministry. This was to have been the end of the journey, but hearing of interest, the group pressed on to the Conestoga area. The mural shows preaching, baptism, feet washing at love feasts, and the laying on of hands as men were set apart for the ministry in the Coventry and Conestoga congregations. This fourth mural panel suggests the course of our church history from 1729 to 1775, from the arrival of Alexander Mack in America to the height of the power of the sour press and the building of the Germantown church house. Note the waxing and the waning of the storm cloud of the Ephrata movement and the hint of the coming storm, the Revolutionary War. Alexander Mack, his 3 sons, and the large company of members from Europe are welcomed as they land at Philadelphia in 1729. The sister weeping in the rear of the group symbolizes the sorrow that came 6 years later when Mack died at the age of 56. By 1738, there was a regular Sunday afternoon meeting for young people at Germantown. Christopher Sauer printed cards for use in these meetings in 1744. This was probably the first Sunday school literature printed in America. See the staunch Peter Becker standing like a rock against the raging wind of false doctrines coming from Ephrata. Christopher Sauer, at a love feast, dedicates himself to meet the need for a brethren printer. In 1738, he launched a business that became the outstanding press in colonial America. Martin Erner is seen as moderator of our first annual conference, held in 1742, probably in his own home. Here stand Christopher Sauer II, associate with and successor to his father in the printing business, and his good friend and counselor Alexander Mack, Jr., son of the organizer of the church. For many years, these men were the co-elders of the Germantown congregation. Christopher Sauer II brought out second and third editions of the famous Sauer Bible of 1743, which was the first Bible to be printed in this country in any European language. He also published the first religious magazine to appear in this country and distributed it free of charge as a public service. Alexander Mack, Jr., in the opinion of Dr. M.G. Broomball, wrote more important religious guidance than any other leader of American colonial thought. In the lower right-hand corner is the Germantown Church building, erected in 1770 and still in use. For a time, the other building you see had been used for church services. It also served for many years as a home for the aged. This panel visualizes for us the destruction of the sour press in the Revolutionary War and the movement of the brethren to frontier regions in the South and West. This movement took the bulk of the church away from centers of education and culture, and the brethren became a typical rural frontier people. John Garber, brethren minister, journeys through Pennsylvania and Maryland to Virginia, where he became the father of our churches in Virginia. Elder George Wolfe and his family go down the Ohio River in 1800 from Uniontown, Pennsylvania to Kentucky on a flatboat they had built. The man on horseback is George Hoke, a prominent elder in northeastern Ohio, who served as moderator of annual conference continuously from 1848 to 1858, noticed the Bible under his arm. The brethren were still a New Testament people. The frontier produced a strong type of people with worthy heroes and heroines. The 1850 annual conference marks a watershed in the history of our church. Needs theology appeared that year. Books, publications, and schools were about to burst through upon the scene. Great changes were in the offing. Let us look at the details of the panel. The man on horseback is Elder George Wolfe of Illinois, one of the great pioneers of the state, a giant in both size and intellect. He was a leader of the far western brethren, who, although out of touch with the rest of the brotherhood, actually maintained some of the original practices of the church better than the annual conference group. Especially was this true in respect to the mode of feet washing. The man at the plow is emblematic of the many farmer ministers who, following the frontier, plowed and preached their way across America. The man preaching to the Indians is Adam Payne, wandering missionary to the Indian tribes. He was a man of peace, and out-talked Black Hawk at a war council held about 20 miles south of Dixon, Illinois, on July 1st, 1830. He preached at the village of Chicago in 1832 and was ambushed and slain by Indian enemies in May of that same year. Jacob Leatherman, famous walking preacher of this period, is said to have traveled 20,000 miles in mission work. Sunday schools, which had died out long before, were being established again, often against heavy opposition. The 1850 annual meeting, faced with the question whether there's any danger to be apprehended from publishing a paper among us, decided to let the matter lay over until next year. The tides of progress, however, could not be dammed up for long. At the right, in typical costume of the period, stands Sarah Reiter Major, first woman minister of the church, and her husband, Thomas Major, also a minister. Elder John Klein of Virginia, great preacher, doctor, and Christian statesman of this and the Civil War period, rides his faithful Nell for the last time. At this very spot he was martyred for our peace principles. This seventh panel pictures for us the awakening of the church during the period 1851 to 1876, an awakening that took place despite the titanic forces of upheaval and destruction unleashed by the war between the states. Here stands Henry Kurtz, trained minister and practical printer, who, like a blood transfusion, came into the Church of the Brethren from the Lutheran Church. In 1851, as a private venture, he started the Gospel Visitor in a spring house loft on his farm near Poland, Ohio, and opened the modern era of printing in our church. From 1852 to 1874, the Brethren established 9 schools, only to see them all close. Our artists could not follow the movement in complete detail, but suggests bold outlines. Cedar Grove Seminary at Broadway, Virginia, organized in 1859, had John Klein as an active supporter. The year 1861 saw S.Z. Sharp opening Kishocoquilus Seminary in Pennsylvania, and James Quinter a seminary at New Vienna, Ohio. This slide also indicates our expansion to the Pacific Coast by showing Daniel Leedy, our first minister on the Pacific Coast, who arrived in Oregon in 1854. Here you see the great upheaval of the war between the states, pictured as a mighty whirlwind that caught society and its institutions up into its satanic embrace. Following this fiery interlude, the Brethren were again trying to establish schools. Some of these early attempts are shown here, along with J.G. Royer and Lewis Kimmel, educational pioneers. The man in the center of this trio is Christian Hope, a Danish harness maker who led the church into its first foreign missions commitment in 1875 and sailed to Denmark early in 1876. In 1876 at Huntington, Pennsylvania, with Jacob Zook as principal, the school that became Juniata College opened its doors. At last, the church was really launched in education. H.B. Broombaugh, James Quinter, M.G. Broombaugh, and C.C. Ellis were great figures in Juniata history. The years 1877 to 1894 saw the growth of a world outlook, the coming of a period of evangelism, the founding of more colleges, and the opening of our India mission field. It also witnessed a threefold division of the church. D.L. Miller, pictured holding the globe, in his books, Gospel Messenger articles, and lectures, told the story of his world travels in such a way that the church was given a world vision. He was a man of practical affairs, involved in establishing Mount Morris College and in the acquiring of our publishing interests by the church. The story of Mount Morris, Ashland, and Bridgewater colleges is suggested here by representative men. J.H. Moore, veteran editor, holds a copy of our first Sunday school lesson paper started by S.C. Sharp. Education, world missions, and other new ideas brought diversity of opinion and sharp dissension. The division of the church in the early 1880s into three parts is symbolized by Peter Need, leader of the Old Order group facing to your left, Henry R. Holsinger, leader of the Progressive group facing to your right, and Daniel P. Saylor, leader of the Conservatives, facing directly ahead. The artist points out that each holds a Bible in which he finds the grounds for his views, but that each stands stiff-legged. Despite division, the central wing of the church continued to make progress. I.J. Rosenberger became one of the great evangelists of the church. McPherson College was established in 1887. Pictured here are S.C. Sharp, first president, and two later presidents, Edward France and D.W. Kurtz. The story moves on as you see R.H. Miller, veteran debater and defender of the doctrine of the church, and representatives who suggest the histories of Daleville and Laverne colleges. These are D.N. Eller and I.N.H. Beam for Daleville, and David Coons, W.I.T. Hoover, and C. Ernest Davis for Laverne. The period came to a glorious close with the opening of our India mission field in 1894. Here are W.B. Stover, pioneer missionary to India, and Elder P.G. Buggett, Indian leader who visited the church in America in 1950. The 9th mural depicts the high water mark of the educational movement in the founding of Manchester, Elizabethtown, and Bethany, Brethren expansion in America to the far corners of the West under the slogan, Church Extension by Colonization, and the rising tide of foreign missions that opened a field in China in 1908. The panel is integrated around the idea of the local church as the heart of the brotherhood. E.S. Young, Otho Wenger, and V.F. Schwamm suggest the story of Manchester College. Associated with them were men like I.D. Parker and L.D. Eikenberry. G.N. Falkenstein, H.K. Ober, and A.C. Balker remind us of the story of Elizabethtown. The local church is the heart of the brotherhood, from which all life and work proceed and through which all currents pass. Bethany has become an oxygenizing organ for the leadership of the church. The Brethren Publishing House and the General Boards have been arteries carrying the life current of the church, but the force pump and regulatory mechanism keeping the current in circulation is the local church. Pictured are notable characters connected with the local church, the publishing house, the general boards of the church, and the seminary. The panel ends with this picture of F.H. Crumpacker, beloved pioneer missionary to China, and two noted Chinese brethren, Pastor Yin of North China and Moy Guang of South China. The 10th mural covers the period 1909 to 1923 by suggesting the better organization which the church began to establish for its work, the destruction and confusion produced by World War I, the recovery and progress of the church following the tragedy of war, and the opening of our African mission in 1922. Embryonic boards and committees were made into real boards as the church strengthened her organizational structure. Typical examples are the General Education Board, the men in the circle, appointed in 1908, and the General Sunday School Board, the men standing in a line, appointed in 1911. The women shown were pioneers in the organization of the Sisters' Aid Society movement. Shown to the right of the sisters is Ezra Flory, the first General Secretary of the General Sunday School Board. You are looking at the Winona Lake Tabernacle, where our 1919 conference met following the soul-trying experiences of World War I. H.C. Early, moderator, stands with his hands on the book. William Beery and Sadie Wampler are leading the singing. Between Beery and Early stand two veteran leaders of the period, J.H. Moore, editor of the Gospel Messenger, and I.W. Taylor. On the other side of Early are Otho Wenger and J.W. Lear. This conference sent out 32 missionaries and lifted a cash offering of $150,000. In 1922, H. Stover Culp carried the light of the gospel to the dark continent when the brethren opened a mission in Africa. Bassi Minso, one of our African brothers, gave living proof of great results when he visited America in 1948. The quarter of a century, 1924 to 1948, brought the church from the establishment of youth camps through the Holocaust of another world war into the midst of heroic service efforts to meet the challenge of a ruined world facing the anxieties of an atomic age. In 1921, 2 summer conferences for young people were held. These conferences soon led to the establishment of youth camps. Camp Laverne and Camp Alexander Mack were started in 1924. 4 great pioneers in the camping movement were Edgar Rothrock of Camp Laverne, L.W. Schultz of Camp Mack, H.B. Spiker of Camp Harmony, and C.S. Eikenberry of Camp Bethel. At the campfire circle, you see Dan West, discussion leader, and Alvin F. Brightbill, song director. World War II struck the church with swirling tides of propaganda and war hysteria. Before its end, the atomic bomb ushered us into a terrifying new age. The church responded to tragic world need with an inspired Brethren service program in which tons of relief goods, hundreds of heifers, and millions of dollars were distributed without regard to race, color, or creed. M.R. Ziegler was an energetic leader in this work. The church strengthened its organization by establishing the General Brotherhood Board. Our youth sought to reinforce their inner spirits by the spiritual fellowship of prayer cells. In 2008, when the Church of the Brethren comes to its 300th anniversary, will it have made any significant contribution to history? In this final picture, the artist makes a prophecy. In a world where Satan goads men to the desperation of insane warfare, the essence of what the King of Kings desires is dramatized in the Brethren Love Feast. Here at one table are seen all races, tongues, and peoples enjoying the security that comes from humble mutual service, from lives kept clean by the constant flowing grace of God, and from vital loving fellowship with each other and with the Lord. Small wonder that the young family seen at the left desires this peaceful solution to society's troubles, and that the aged minister and wife seen on the right are satisfied as they realize that for which they gave their lives is the supreme help for man in this world and the essence of his hope in the world to come.